Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to this session that is devoted, I hope it's not too loud, should I keep it like this, to the European Research Council, or ERC. My name is Ylva Huber. I'm the national contact point for the ERC in Austria, and it's a particular pleasure to be able to have the opportunity to discuss the key features, the specificities of the ERC at this conference, because many of you may know that particularly the success rate for MSCA fellows is significantly higher in applications to the ERC. So I think it is a perfect setting to discuss this very particular program, and I will also seek that we have really enough time for questions and discussion during this session. What I think would be a good way to proceed, I know there's certainly a lot of knowledge already on the ERC in this room, but just to have a first recapitulation or a summary of what are the main features, what are the funding principles, the mindset, if you like, of the European Research Council. And then, as you may know already, we have a quite particular selection procedure for how proposals are evaluated in the ERC, and I think it's a very good idea to get acquainted early with this evaluation system, because this hopefully will support you in preparing an application, and the whole idea of this session would be to support you in thinking early of a possible application to the ERC, because early preparation is the best thing you can do. The main idea of the ERC, I would say, is really to give you enough funding to pursue that kind of research and that research question that you're most interested in. So in a way, implementing your research vision. And that may take time. That may take lots of feedback loops also for you to sharpen your idea. And I hope that this session can be a first step towards this development. I would also So this will, depending on how many questions we have at this stage, take maybe 15 minutes, but then we will also take a closer look at how can you go about preparing an ERC proposal? What are practical experiences? And here we had the luck that we can, as a national contact point organization, we had many contacts and have contacts to ERC panel members, to evaluators. We have been screening evaluation comments across all fields. And so I've been trying to capture, let's say, some main messages from these lessons learned that hopefully will be of interest to you. But the idea is then that we take up your questions and maybe guide the discussion into the areas most interesting for you. So then there is a dedicated question and answer session after that. But if you have any, particularly if it's an urgent question, a question of understanding, we can, of course, address it immediately. So maybe the first question is, what kind of research is the ERC, or are the reviewers working for the ERC looking for? And maybe it's good to think of the ERC as a program made by scientists for scientists, because in a way that was kind of the history of how it was generated. When the ERC came about, some researchers said, come on, now researchers will take over in Brussels. So this was somehow the spirit. Of course, it isn't quite like that, but the ERC has remarkable autonomy also in a very special place, one can say, in the European funding landscape. Because it should be, let's say the ERC reviewers are looking for exciting science. Science that is able to change the field. And it can be any field. Like the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, and we have many similarities between MSCA and ERC, it is entirely bottom-up. And we can also see that research in any area can be funded. But the ambition of the ERC is to fund research that really shapes the field, changes the field, answers fundamental questions. So you may have heard they have coined a particular term for this. It's called frontier science, really pioneering science. And in the end, it is also so far the only program that says our only funding criterion is scientific excellence. Now we are here in an environment, and we had many talks also questioning the concept of scientific excellence. This can, of course, be looked at in many ways and very many fields, or many, yes, depending also on the field. But maybe think about it as scientific excellence as seen by your peers. Would your peers, would scientists, close but also far away from your field, be excited about what you want to do? And most important, are you yourself excited about it? Because as we can also see, and you are used to competitiveness, the ERC is a highly competitive program. I think we heard yesterday for MCAA actions, you have to think 1 out of 10 can be funded, which is really very tough. We are at a similar rate at the ERC. It's getting a little bit better now. So we have maybe 13% across all fields, but you have to think your proposal has to be 1 out of 10, really exciting the reviewers. So that's also one of the similarities, I would say, with the MCAA actions. Now, what I'm showing here, yeah, it's here. I'm sorry, I hope it's okay if I stand, because I feel a little bit trapped behind this. So this is a typical setting for the vast majority of ERC grants. There is a specific additional program, and I will be happy to come to that later. But typically, the ERC focuses on you as the individual researcher. It wants to fund individual researchers and their teams of their choice. But if you like, you could also do it entirely on your own. I've actually never seen it, but I don't know if you work in mathematics or any field, you could also say, I'm going to do this all by myself. So in other words, the ERC is nearly anxiously somehow separating itself from what it calls consortia projects, large network projects. As we will see later, it's perfectly fine if you collaborate. You can choose with whom you want to collaborate, but the project is really centered on you, on your research vision. And I would say, yeah, more or less 2/3 of the funding given by the ERC over the years really is going to early and midterm researchers. The idea is to support the transition to independence, to really give enough money, enough air under the wings, however you want to call it, to really have your own independent research team and full autonomy on your own research agenda. So this is why many see Marie Sklodowska-Curie actions and the ERC in a kind of a continuum. And really, I would say they are sister programs, but the focus on really scientific excellence and your personal career may be a particular hallmark of the ERC. And now in this very simple scheme, you see the main 2 ingredients. So the principal investigator, outstanding in his or her career stage. And they are really addressing, you could say, all the career stages. So you may be familiar with the terminology already, but there are so-called starters who are typically maybe the first time in the position to establish the first own independent research team or group. So this should be really rather early stage, and we will have a look at the formal criteria in a minute. Consolidator would be more the midterm stage, when you already maybe have your own group, but you want to pursue your own research direction further, you want to consolidate your team. And then there's also quite a big stream for already advanced researchers. And of course, this is also interesting because they can take, or established researchers, so they are called in an advanced, to be in an advanced stage. But this is of course also very interesting because this can be big research groups taking a new turn in their science, and they can attract PhD students and postdocs and have additional career opportunities. So that's the PI side, and that's central. It's really, everything is revolving around the principal investigator. On the other side, the ERC wants the majority or the big part of the research to be done in Europe, because this is a not very well hidden agenda of the ERC to attract and keep the best scientists from the world to Europe, or keep them in Europe. And it has worked quite well. I mean, many of you may know that meanwhile, host institutions, institutions across Europe are comparing themselves and are being compared based on how many ERC grants they attract. Because this idea of really only funding the best science, however it is perceived by peer review, that has paid off in a way. So host institutions are starting to develop strategies how they can attract researchers to the profile of an ERC grantee or who can receive ERC grants. And that has also, many say, actually contributed to trying to have better framework conditions for researchers at institutions, which is, I think, very much in line also with MSCA, what they are trying to do also. This is another link. So just to focus maybe on the main points here, you see here in the first line, minimum time commitment by the PI, the principal investigator. So you should show that the ERC project is really a priority for you at the time when you submit it. Because as we will see, typically these are 5-year projects, and the reviewers want to feel that at this point when you submit it, it will really make a change for you and an important impact on your career. So you're expected to devote minimum 50% as a starter of your total working time, meaning including teaching everything, to this project. Experience shows that it can be much higher, of course. Some go for 100%. We will maybe talk about this later, what is a good ratio. But it should be your top priority. It shouldn't be like, if you happen to have lots of funding, just another nice funding stream, but really carrying what you want to do. And so there's a kind of decline, 40% for the consolidators, 30% for the advanced grantees, because they see you have, of course, also many other things to do, but it has to be a substantial part of your work. One thing that I think is very attractive in particular also is this issue of PI autonomy. So maybe just a quick survey, how many of you have ever had a look at an ERC application or have seen anything about how the forms look, how the applications look? So I knew there was already a lot of knowledge, but it can be still, thank you for that. But what may be new to many of you is already at the time of the application, you have to put a letter. So the host institution with whom you apply has to put a signed and stamped letter saying that if Mrs. Y, Mr. X get this grant, he or she will be completely autonomous in how the money is distributed, with whom you want to publish, who will be on your publications, who will be co-authors. You have the right to have the access to the necessary infrastructure, charter and code should be implemented, and so on. So these are things that already the host institution has to commit itself to before you even get the grant. So autonomy is very important, and it goes so far, and I think also this is still a unique feature. I know you have mobility, of course, in MSCA actions, but if at a certain point after you got the grant, and it could be 2 days after you got the grant, or a year, or very much later, if another host institution in Europe offers you better conditions, also in terms of your career, you can take your grant and go there. And that's a very, very frequent thing happening. So it's a standard situation for the ERC. But I think it's pretty unique, and one of the reasons why the ERC is in very high demand, maybe I think yesterday it was said already, which is amazing, 120,000 MSCA fellows funded. In the ERC we are around approaching 10,000, so it's a bit more than 9,000 now, but of course these are larger projects. But I think they have all a similar agenda, and this is why they're also very, very much in demand. So I don't want to go into too many details, and we can, of course, discuss any questions. Oh, I think, by the way, if you, there is a gallery also, but maybe it's easier to hear down here if you cannot find a seat. So this is showing you some formalities, and also, of course, how much money is in there. So, and I hope you will get all the slides, I'm quite sure, so you don't have to take pictures, but you can, of course. Yeah. So the starting grant will give you 1.5 million for 5 years. You can have a shorter project, then it will be reduced a bit. The consolidated grant 2 million and advanced grant 2.5 million. For the rest of the presentation, I will really focus on starting and consolidator unless we have specific questions for the advanced grant. And I will talk about the synergy grant also in a minute. It's a kind of a quite new kid on the block and also interesting. But let's talk about also the formalities. What makes you a starter formally? the ERC had also a problem of oversubscription, very much so. And this is also why they have implemented some rules restricting resubmissions. We will come to that. So that's also something you have to bear in mind, that of course, like if any competitive grant, you might not get it at the first time, but there are some limits you cannot immediately reapply. This has helped the success rate, so the success rate is higher, but that was one way of somehow limiting the amount of applications. And the other way was that they did a kind of streaming to say how many can apply for a certain scheme. And they are really following this to the letter. So you are a starter. So for every call, there is a specific reference date. It's written down in the level, in the lower part of the yellow box, for example. So for the next upcoming call, it will be the 1st of January 2020. It's always the 1st of January. And according to that date, you calculate your time window. So to qualify as a starter in the next call, which will have a deadline probably on 16th of October, but you didn't hear that from me. Your PhD has to be awarded prior to minimum 2 and maximum 7 years prior to that date. And for the consolidated, similar, but 7 to 12 years. Exactly. That's the reason for that's a budgetary reason, because it's already for the work program 2020. So you may still have a deadline in 2019, but you will be the call is under the work program 2020, and this is why you have the reference date. Jen. Yes, but it's the year is 2019, but the work program is already for 2020. It's about the cycle, how the ERC plans. Yeah? So. Sorry, it may be confusing. That's why it's important that you look in the work program, but if there's any question on that, we can clarify it. But the next call is really with this reference date. And what is very important is that we've been talking about this in other sessions. There may be reasons why a career can be interrupted or not so continuous. So there are several factors that are taken into account. Maternity leave, for example, automatically as a mother, the birth of a child will extend this time window by 18 months. And even more if you can prove a longer maternity leave, for example. And for paternity, it is the actual amount of leave taken, but before or after the PhD award. And the other reason can be long-term illness, but it's pretty much it. So there's a small amount of factors that can extend the time window. A short word about the Synergy Grant. We may want to come back to it later. This is quite new, and this is, you could say, a possibility also in an ERC grant to work as a larger group. It's still a small group, but there's a recognition that for some really interesting and more interdisciplinary questions, it can be very important that several principal investigators work together. So here you can have 2 to 4 principal investigators, and they can be at any career stage. And I mean, the ERC, the keyword for ERC research is groundbreaking, frontier research. For the Synergy Grant, they are, if you like, even aiming a little bit higher on the global scale. So they are talking about transformative research. Yeah, really. So, I mean, of course, these are all words, yes, but we see in the evaluations that they are really trying to spot the most exciting research. So it's still something that has to be taken very much in has to be borne in mind. But this is, of course, very attractive, and it can also be a way of joining early as a starter or as a consolidator an exciting, more interdisciplinary research team. So let us now look a little bit closer at how these fantastic projects are actually selected. We have said scientific excellence is the only criterion for funding. They are looking at scientific excellence from 2 angles, and they are not very surprising. They are looking at the research project as such, and they are looking at the principal investigator in his or her respective career stage. And I will show you first, also maybe to familiarize you, just roughly with the structure of the proposal and the connected evaluation steps, and then we will look a little bit at the questions that are asked. So the ERC proposal is quite slim, but altogether maybe not much slimmer than an MCA proposal. You have two things you have to submit. So part A, yes, is I would say relatively slim administrative form. You know it also from MCA. You have to fill it online. It's okay, yeah? But of course you have to put some important things to show that you're eligible, but this is not a big deal. The core is of course part B, the proposal. So if you hear the terms B1, B2, this is simply because of the structure of the proposal. And the point is you have to submit actually two versions of the same story. A short, very concise, capturing the essence part of your proposal. This is B1, the so-called extended synopsis, 5 pages, which can be very hard, really, to capture what you want to say in these 5 pages. This is accompanied by 2 pages on your CV, which is quite tabularic CV. We will look at some examples. And the track record, which is focusing on your publication record, mainly. So this is part B1. And then you also submit part B2, which is the extended version, 15 pages, also not overwhelming. But there you can give, for example, more information on methodology, on your team, and so on. So it's bolstering somehow what you're saying in these 5 pages. And unfortunately, you don't know if part B2 will ever be read. So part B1, if part B1 is really inspiring to the reviewers, they will be excited and say, yes, now we want to read part B2. Unfortunately, it's quite a tough bottleneck. So it's around, have you any idea how many proposals go in step 2? Any guesses? It's only 25% approximately, 25 to 30%. So quite a tough bottleneck. But if you make that one, you have double rewards. First of all, really the chance of getting the money. And secondly, you can immediately reapply. So you're definitely recognized for having made it to step 2. You don't have any waiting window or anything if you make it to the second step. And we will dive a bit more into the evaluation procedure, because I think it's a very interesting procedure, but you really should know about it when preparing the proposal. Those guys who really decide whether your project is funded or not, many of them will probably not be specialists in your field. They call themselves, and I mean, you also have 8 panels in the MSCA, there may be quite a similar situation, but in the ERC it's really designed the way that these are generalists. They are somehow supposed to understand the big tectonic movements in the field. And see if what you are proposing really is exciting, also to someone maybe who is not so close. And that, I think, is very good to know in preparing your proposal. Whom should you have challenge your idea? Who can bring the right perspective on your proposal? But, of course, 1 or 2 of them will be hopefully rather close to your field. They should understand what you're doing. So you should be crystal clear in the main settings of your project in these 5 pages, that also others can relate to it. And they really have the final say. But what happens then, and only they will read in the first step your proposal. And if they say this 5-pager is just great, let's have a look at the detail, then it will go to step 2, and your entire proposal will be available for reading. And now the specialists come in. So these generalists will call up, so there are 4 generalists typically, minimum 3, but typically 4. And they will be reading this, discussing it, and then call upon specialists, so whom they think can really understand if what you say is sounding wonderful, but methodology may be flawed or something. So they will get in the specialists, and this, maybe I just jump ahead to show you this in a picture, if I manage. Yes. So here on the left side we have these generalists, yeah? So we have a panel of 10 to 16 persons, 4 of whom will read your proposal, and you see the headlines of these panels above. And again, this will be all, I hope, made available, but please feel free also to take a picture. And in the second step, they take in the specialists. And the specialists, they are just commenting remotely. And now something exciting happens, because if you are in step 2, you're automatically invited to an interview in Brussels. And I think also this is a very important feature. Because the specialists can say, okay, we don't believe this can fly, it sounds great, but this and this methodological flaw and so on. But they will not be discussing. Only the panel members will really be discussing your proposal. And when you come to the interview in Brussels, you will be in a room, a rather small room, much smaller than this, with these panel members, amongst them those who have really read your proposal. But what they will do is, they will read out some comments from the specialists to you and see if you have an answer. And that, I think, is a very important feature. You can answer to things that maybe were not clear in the proposal, and you can show yourself as really a credible team leader, a leader with a vision in the best sense, and that makes, I think, this review a quite interesting setting, but demanding, of course, because in the end you have to satisfy two audiences. The generalists who really need to back you, but if the specialists are really throwing big stones, then it's difficult. So you have also to keep at least the majority of the specialists on your side. Yes, yes, please. Okay, now let's try if this works so beautifully with the mics again. Thank you for your help.
Just want to make sure that I'm not missing something. So in the step one of the review is only reviewing your CV and.
No, the entire B1, so this is the core, this is the 5 pages about your project, but yes, also the CV and the track record, but only this part is reviewed. The rest is not accessible, it's encrypted.
Okay, so the project is not...
Now that's the project. B1 really capturizes your project in 5 pages, and that's the demanding thing, how to do that if you have something really ambitious to make it clear on 5 pages. But yes, the project is pivotal. Yeah?
But should be understandable for like a general panel.
Yes, not like, you know, they're very clever scientists, many of them have grants, they are used to read also a little bit beyond the field, so never to underestimate them. Yeah. But yes, writing in a clear language that is not too specialistic, yeah, that's exactly.
And I have another question about this synoptic extended synopsis, something like that.
Yes, that's B1 in a way, yeah.
And can you explain this one a little bit more?
We will come to that a little bit later when I show the structure, but I just wanted to give you the first flavor on this. Okay? Yes? Okay, we have another question. Okay. Sorry, please wait for the mic because we are so happy that it works now. And yes, I've seen you.
Do we have the names of who's going to be the member of the panel?
Thank you for that question. Not before the call, but you can have very educated guesses, and that will be one of the tips, yeah? Because these panel members, they are, at least to a bigger degree, alternating between 2 years. So if you look at the panel 2 years ago, or in the year you submit, you will have probably around 40%, 40-50% maybe the same people, but there will also be new researchers serving as panel members. So you will not know exactly, but what I would really recommend, and it's good that we take that early, that you look at the background of these persons, that you look what they have been doing, and that you ask yourself, okay, if I would have submitted 2 years ago, and I see this list of researchers, and some of these panels can be very broad, yeah? Thinking of history or also physiology, everything is there, from cancer to development, so it's not easy. And you look at this list and you say, who of these 4, probably to whom of this list, what 4 persons would probably have been chosen to read my proposal at that time, if I would have submitted then. And then you go look them up, look at the background, and that could be one way to, I would say, build bridges to show what is in your proposal also for someone from another field to make it exciting. So thank you for that. That's an important point.
I have another question related to this. Do we have somehow a list of possible reviewers? So you said that you have the panel members, that sometimes we have what was 2 years ago, we don't know, maybe some of them are going to be the next 2 years, but we have a list of possible people that could be there, so at least we know. Like, I'm not saying to know the member, but...
Yeah, nothing is published by the ERC. So really the best thing you can do is look at that list, but There are also lists published by the specialist reviewers in step 2, and some of them could become panel members later. If you have a question here, sorry, afterwards, and then here. And grantees are also always a good guess, but there's nothing official saying, okay, in this pool we will choose persons, because they want to really be flexible also in having the best composition of the panels. Please.
Yeah, I have a question, because the first scheme, the starting scheme, is from 2 to 7 years after the PhD. But I was wondering if you have any information about the success rate when you try it 2 or 3 years after the PhD.
Very good question.
How do they take that into consideration as well when they look at the CV?
Yes, that's really a recurring theme, and the ERC is very happy to show the flat curve, the really flat success rate curve. I would say starting in year 4 after the PhD, 4 to actually 12 or 4 to 7 and then across, so it's quite flat there. One has to say very early after, so 2 to 3 years after the PhD, we see about 30% of the success rate or 50%. But the ERC also says so few PIs dare to apply so early, and they're really, it's like a mantra at every NCP meeting also, please, they can apply earlier, because it is possible, and we are a bit worried that everybody is waiting 4 or 5 years after the PhD. But to be honest, looking at the statistics, it's true. Yeah? If you have 3 or 4 years after your PhD, you're in the range where the success rate hardly fluctuates anymore. But I could also imagine that it's really a matter of how many really apply that early. And it's also important in that context to know that the reviewers will really look at whether you are an early starter or a late starter, an early consolidator or a late consolidator. So they are not just saying, okay, you're in this category and this is completely streamlined. Yeah? Okay, maybe one more question and then we can move a bit forward. Oh, sorry, you and then you. Yes,
so
please, sorry.
I was wondering if the urban legends on how tough the interviews are in Brussels are true.
We have a collection of urban legends, and so we really collect interview reports. We are very happy that grantees tell us, or interviewees tell us. Actually, mostly they say it's quite a good experience. Some of them felt a bit disappointed sometimes by the more generalistic questions, or some of them really felt one panel member maybe wasn't fair, but I would say that's really the minority. Most of them say it's extremely professional, and they found it of course they were usually nearly everybody tells us that he or she was more excited than usual in this interview situation. You will be used to interviews and so on, but in Brussels, and there's this atmosphere of hundreds of people sitting in the rooms and waiting for the interviews, it's building tension, some people pacing up and down, so we've heard lots of stories, so you can think that you may be really much more nervous than you used to be. But I would say really the majority says it has been a good experience. There were clever questions and so on. And we also, I think most NCPs, I will show you later, we have of course an NCP network also for the ERC. NCPs, but also institutions offer trainings for this. So the best you can do is really to put yourself in this situation. Look for the most hostile environment. No, I'm joking. But really try to get yourself being used to be grilled in that way. And yeah, we can come later to that. But so I don't know what you have heard, but yes, tough, but most of them say not unpleasant. Yeah, of course, challenging, but overall we get the feedback, a good experience, a rewarding experience. Okay? Yeah.
I will have 7 years since PhD on the 12th of September. And you said the deadline will be somewhere in October.
Yes.
So I will have to apply for consolidator even for this.
Yes, it can be one day that makes a difference. Yeah, they are really completely tough on that. Yeah, so we have to maybe can look individually, because it's really this 1st of January. So the deadline doesn't matter. The 1st of January 2020 is what counts. Yeah.
Also, if I have
also if the deadline doesn't
September.
We can look at that, yeah. But really, if you're fine with the 1st of January 2020, if you have no longer than if your PhD is not longer passed on that date than 7 years. If it has not been awarded prior to 7 years or an extended time window, then you're fine. Yeah? So the call deadline doesn't count.
I have a second question.
Okay.
I've seen that in Vienna there are trainings
Yes.
for
Yes.
starting and
Yes.
consolidating
I will come
in
to that.
social sciences and humanities, and I'm in cultural heritage, so I was thinking maybe I can apply to a Marie Curie microgrant to come to the session like in May or
Okay,
November,
we can definitely,
but I
yeah,
don't know
yeah.
where they are advertised, because always
Okay.
when I see it, it's
Okay,
too late.
60 days before they take place, we advertise them. But I will show you later what we offer in Austria, and you have similar trainings and services across Europe. Yes, yes, so if we can talk about that. So we are, of course, it is primarily for researchers applying from Austria, because we have, of course, a limitation of seats. But if there's a possibility, we are happy, because I think this is a great exchange also between different host institution cultures and countries, also to have researchers that at the moment do not apply or do not intend to apply from Austria. But primarily, if we have to use the capacity for researchers applying within Austria, but we can talk in detail then. Okay, so that's just, so thank you for all these questions. We made already some leaps forward, so we can maybe be shorter on some of the slides. But this I wanted to show you. This is really what the panel members will read, and also the specialist reviewers will read and have to answer, and it's really an online system, so they write their comments directly online on these questions, and you see the flavor of where the ERC grants are supposed to go. So first, they're looking at the research project. That's the first criterion in the list. So I will not read everything, but groundbreaking nature and potential impact of the research project. And here we are really talking about scientific impact. So the ERC has been very, careful not to have policy agendas or additional important factors that may be part of the evaluation of other programs in its setting. It's really focusing on the science, but of course, that doesn't mean that the evaluation is taking place in a bubble. If you're working in material science, of course it will be important to see whether the research can be relevant at industrial scale and so on. So it's not an ivory tower, but it's really focusing, let's say, on scientific content, on conceptual advances, on novelty as specific to the field. So they are asking for ambitious objectives, really beyond state of the art, so not wherever you can, right? But it has to be really pushing the boundaries in a way. And then you have this third point. To what extent is the proposed research high risk, high gain? And then they explain a little bit what they mean. Maybe one should clarify, high risk is not a value in itself. If you have the possibility for a fantastic breakthrough because you discovered new data, or so you don't have any real risks. Yeah, this is maybe sometimes the case for social sciences and humanities, though there are lots of risks there, but the concept of risk is different depending on the field, and you don't have to invent a risk. But it should really be worthwhile science, and very often, or like promising a breakthrough. And very often this comes with risk. And the ERC reviewers are ready to accept risks to quite some extent, but it shouldn't be overstretched, and I think that is in reality also some concern. How much risk are they really willing to take? The ERC is discussing itself also about it, and they think they should be more risk prone and so on, but I would say they're really trying their best, but you should make a strong case also for feasibility. So not just saying, oh, this is risky and everything can probably go wrong and so on. You have to, you have to tune the message that you capture these areas, researchers at a sweet spot where the panel members simply cannot resist your proposal because they think, okay, overall, most likely this will be successful, maybe some aspects won't, but it's definitely worth taking the risk. This is the notion that they need to get. But I think it's important to know that the ERC is ready to take such risks. And they often arise, particularly if you work between disciplines, which the ERC in principle also loves, but you can always have also some problems if you try to address interdisciplinary audiences. Yes, so here we have the feasibility. measure or message also to what extent is it feasible. Then they want to know about your research methodology. It's great if you, for example, developed a new method. This can also support the notion of a new approach to things. But it's also not necessary every time. So this is really think about what is also specific to your field, what makes research in your field exciting. And then, yes, of course, you should have a good organization of your proposal, so time scales, resources, your personal time commitment. So this is not surprising, but this is also part of, is this ERC project, can it fly? And is it really also up to the standards of the ERC? And then the questions regarding the principal investigator, him or herself. They are looking at the past, but also at the present to extrapolate in the future. So how have you shown previously that you can conduct groundbreaking research? And of course, as a starter, you may have had less opportunity to do so, but there needs to be this evidence of scientific maturity, of the potential for it. And we will come to the ERC profile also a bit later. So they want to see, and a panel member recently said, if I look at the CV of a grant application, of an applicant, I want to see something special. And I think this also fits in lots of the discussions we had on unusual careers, maybe. So in principle, the ERC is really open for it. But we have also to say that you're competing probably with persons who have a very full publication record and top publications. So we have this issue of high impact factor publications and so on. I think this is still dominating. But also the ERC is really trying to pick the original researchers also. So they are aware of that. So don't be afraid if you had interruptions in your career, but show what makes you really stand out and what you think are your most important achievements. That should become clear. And we will come a little bit to that. So that I've already shown you. This is to illustrate, this waiting window business, which unfortunately still is there, and I'm afraid it's going to stay. So I showed you these 2 steps of the evaluation, and the proposals are grouped in 3 categories. Basically, you always want to be in A. A means in step 1 that you're going to step 2, and in step 2 it means you're most probably funded. Unfortunately, like in MSA, you can also end up on a reserve list, and then you can be A, not funded. But at least you can immediately reapply, and this is also the case if you're have a very strong proposal, but simply not high enough on the ranking list, and you're in a part, so to speak, category B in step 2. You're still free to reapply immediately. In step 1, the situation is a bit different. So only 25 to 30% A's we have in step 1. And then you have, typically can be a really bigger part of B, meaning very good proposal, but not highly ranked enough to make it to step 2. And to avoid complete overflow of submissions, because at some point the ERC had a success rate of 7%, and then it starts, it's a similar problem, I think, with MCA. Then you really have to wait 1 year, which is in practice actually 2 years, so it's quite tough, because you wait nearly 1 year for the result, and then there comes a new call, and you cannot go there. You have to wait for the next call. And if you are, by some reason, in the category C, which means for special aspects, this proposal was seen as non-competitive, really not fit yet for the evaluation, then you have to wait even 2 years. And this can, of course, change whether you're still in the starting window or in the early consolidator window, for example. So I think one shouldn't be too afraid. If you're a late starter or early consolidator, I think you shouldn't be too afraid, but one has to be fair, the statistics still say in the beginning of each time window you have a lower success rate. So it's really a kind of deliberation. With that I would actually like to dig into some reflections stemming from looking at many proposals, looking at evaluation comments, hearing from panel members and grantees, and I think you have captured or you have already raised some of the questions. What should really come across in your proposal? What should you think about early and have many feedback loops? I mean, nothing of that will surprise you, because I think the ERC is a very simple program, and what is true for a good application everywhere else is also true for the ERC. It's just that you have few pages, very tough competition, so it maybe makes it more prominent, all of these features, but nothing is really new. The reviewers want to know, like in an elevator pitch, they want to get an early understanding what is at the core new in what you're proposing, what is really the key novelty. And in that respect, it's of course very important to show that we really have a problem, because sometimes there is no consensus that the knowledge gap is really so big. Yeah? They can say, oh, come on, in literature X, Y, Z, we have actually solved this. Yeah? I see comments like this. So, I mean, very often it's not the case, and everyone knows this is a large knowledge gap you're attacking. But you have to show it. You have to put your research in a broader context, if you like, that everyone sees possibly the potential. And that brings me also to this bigger view, this research vision, which may sound a bit fluffy and philosophical, but in the end, the ERC really wants to understand that if they give you the peer reviewers, scientists like you, they want to understand if they give the funding to you now, you will probably be opening a new research field for yourself. You're actually opening up a new stream of research, a new research direction. So it should be something bigger, something that they understand will probably not just stop after the 5 years of funding. I mean, there can be cases like this. It's not written or anywhere, but we understand that the ERC likes to see this really, that you're building up your own research program with that. So think where you really want to go, what you want to do. And it's very good to give a glimpse of that in the proposal. Of course, it's really about what you're going to do in the next 5 years to hopefully change the field. But you can also then say, if this is successful, we can finally think about doing the next big leap and so on, so that they understand the longer trajectory, possibly, of your research. And then, along with that, we don't have to look at every of these points. I think they are very connected. So researchers, maybe from quite different fields, have to understand that this is a groundbreaking approach. So a big tectonic movement and not maybe just a refinement, a very laudable but solid refinement of research. I will just go through this list and then I'm happy to take the question. So what we see as negative comments typically is really, this is rather incremental research, this is derivative research, it has already been there. But again, there are many differences between fields. In life sciences, if they say the proposal is descriptive, it's usually not a positive comment. In social sciences, it may very much be so. So you know best also how your actual field is looking at things and what excites your community. One thing that we also see is, I mean, in some areas, I don't know, is anyone working in material sciences or ICT? And it's, okay, so many, it's also a big community of the ERC. Methodology may play a big part, and it's a good thing to have a new methodology and so on. But what is dangerous, mostly in an ERC proposal, if they feel that you are developing a method in search of a problem, of an application, so that you have no overarching, driving scientific question, maybe hypothesis, if appropriate, really driving your research. There may be exceptions, but typically having a big new tool and trying it out without any overarching question is not a good idea in the ERC. Life sciences, I wouldn't dare at this stage to submit a proposal without a hypothesis. Yeah? So, I mean, this probably is the case also in other grants. In other fields, it may be less so, but there should be clear research questions. This is also something we see a lot in the evaluation comments. Yes, and focus and scope, this shows a little bit the dilemma, because you want to do something ambitious, but you can also, for an ERC grant, overload your agenda. We see that quite often happening, that they say, fantastic, but why 15 case studies? We don't think the PI can follow up this in the necessary detail. So you have to show that what you're doing is somehow the perfect size to really make a difference in the next 5 years. And then what else you want to do, you can put in your long-term vision, so that one sees, yes, you are aware, you could do also other things, but in your deep conviction, this is the best way to go to have a real change, a breakthrough, possibly in the next 5 years. So you should argue very well for your focus and your scope, or where you put it. Maybe let me also put one thing, I mean, clear objectives, that's no news, you will need it everywhere, but it's sometimes forgotten. I read beautiful proposals, and after 3 times I realize there are no objectives. It reads fantastic, but you don't know, and that's very dangerous also. But one thing I think is particularly important is what will you be able to tell after the project? What is the explanatory power? If you want. So what how strong are the conclusions you can draw? Is there any potential problem with interpretation methods and so on? So what kind of, in the end, explanatory power comes out of your project? And depending on the field, there may be different factors. Causality, can you show causality, or is it rather a correlation? Can be fine, but very often it will be criticized and so on. So also there, you will best know the tribes and customs of your field. But this is something, how to validate your results and your conclusions is very important also to show in the proposal. And let's say some connected features to this are, you have to show that you know what's going on in the world. The ERC is competition in the end on a global scale. Yeah? They want to get the best researchers in the world to Europe. So you have, and obviously you do, but also maybe to the extent possible, show that you know of competing approaches, and you can really say, yes, we know, and you should put that in a very inclusive wording, and showing, yes, we know there have been important contributions, this and this and this, but the unique feature that I can do is this and that. Yeah? So this is also connected to the competing approaches. Yes, gain-risk balance we have discussed. The next point may be more for social sciences, humanities, but it depends. Thinking that you're addressing generalists, I mean, you will not start with Adam and Eve, you have to, but often it's really problems with definitions. How do you understand a certain concept? In what theoretical framework is it embedded and so on? So they may crush your proposal at step 1 if they're not clear what you're talking about. So these are also very important things. And also, already in the short version, one could think it's not just a fluffy teaser. It should, this B1, this extended synopsis, it should really give the essence of your proposal. So also showing the solidity of your method. Yeah, as an example, selection criteria for case studies, or if you can even have clinical trials to a certain extent, a statistical power analysis, which reminds me of one thing. Frontier research, we said that frontier research is a term that the ERC coined. I mean, I would still say most of the applications are really in basic and fundamental research, but it's not necessarily so. You have many areas also in the ERC which are clearly going into applied research. So the key issue is really being at the pioneering end of the research and looking at fundamental conceptual advances, but not thinking, oh, this is going somehow into application, applied research, I cannot go to the ERC. So that would also be maybe an important myth busting, and the best thing you can do is looking at what has actually been funded, and I will show you the database later, so that you can really see the broad spectrum. Yes, so we mentioned the necessity to reach out, I mean, not to an incredible extent, but a credible way of reaching out also to specialists from other fields, showing what general features, what generalizable outcomes of your research can also be interesting for them. And I think over the years, I've come more and more to the conclusion that it's also very good already when you write your proposal that you think about this interview situation, where you will have 10 minutes to really communicate the essence of your project, thinking of the most unpleasant questions and the weakest spot. Every interesting proposal certainly usually has some weaknesses. How you can best bolster them and show that you have a plan B and so on for the most important risks. And yes, ideally, this altogether is still written as a story, a very personal way. So I think also personally it's best to write it in first person. I mean, there are good examples also to the contrary, but if you write we and I think it gives a more direct connection to the reader and really shows also your confidence in what you want to do. But there are many ways to success, definitely. But these are issues that we see again and again, and I hope this is interesting for you. Is your question still, sorry, I don't, could you please help? Thank you, sorry, that we can hear you. Let me just go quickly. Mm-hmm.
Would you be so kind as to pass that?
I hope the air is still okay. Can you still breathe?
Okay.
Okay.
So a quick question. You didn't say anything. Is it advantages to have a proposal that is interdisciplinary, or because it? Yeah.
Thank you for this. Let's say in theory, yes. And I think also often in practice. They like, because I think it's very much agreed upon that lots of exciting science is happening at the boundaries between disciplines. There's also a wide range of how interdisciplinarity is actually defined. But a word of caution on this. You have seen these panels, so we've been talking about bottom-up and so on. Still, you have to say that one of these 25 panels that I just showed you in a glimpse, and we can go back there, is, so to speak, your harbor, your main group of people that should really understand and look at the proposal. To a certain extent, you have to categorize yourself. You can, and that means a certain restriction maybe, but you can, for example, also choose several panels. I mean, some of the panels are broad anyway, and you fit in there with the interdisciplinary proposal. But there are also cross-panel, really between social sciences and physics and so on. You can also do this, but here a word of caution, and the ERC is very aware of that. I think you have again the problem of peer review. Every reviewer looking at your proposal and really entitled to give an opinion on it wants to be excited personally in a way, in a good way. That means you have to, let me give one critical example. For example, let's say you have developed a new method in physics. You have an established methods in physics that you for the first time will apply for an investigation in social sciences. For social sciences, it would be total breaking news. Never has this algorithm, whatever, been used to look at this data. Fantastic. But it could be that the ERC then also invites a guy from the physics panel on board. And if she or he thinks, okay, this is our standard methodology, this is not exciting for us, you can have a problem. So that's somehow the trickiness, and I often think it's not fair. I think exactly such a proposal should be funded, but we hear that there can be a problem like this. So, and we also have a statistic showing that those proposals that are explicitly cross-panel, so that have really chosen two panels, have a significantly lower success rate, unfortunately. The ERC is aware of that. So actually my advice would be, if you can, stick with your primary panel, but you can most likely, if they feel we need additional expertise, they will get the expertise from another panel, but you're at least not in the you're not formally so much in between two chairs, so to speak. So this is a little bit of an unsolved problem, but I think if you look again at what has been funded, I think there are many encouraging examples. So the ERC as such is interdisciplinary friendly. You can do that too. You can do that too. Yeah, sorry. You can do it. So it's not you're not forced. But thinking where you really want to go, and if you feel you have to do this, I think then you really should follow it. But also the ERC bears some risks on that respect, I'm afraid. So we have discussed a lot already, so I will just show you, because we wanted to show a little bit more about the structure. So what are now the features really of B1 and B2, so this short synopsis. I mean, what this slide actually says is try to put everything important in there, but it should still read nicely and lightly and not like a heavy rock, yeah? Because the panel members will read 30, 40 proposals, not so much time, so they really need to acknowledge the exciting nature of your research also when they are very tired, like with MSCA proposals. But putting your research into a broader context that it really relates to also generalists, clear about your aims, clear about the novelty, everything we have discussed before, and also key information. One sentence or two can make all the difference. How many postdocs do you want to have? How many PhDs? What background should they have? So they understand you have built your dream team, and this is also what it's about. If you could do what you want to do, whom would you hire? With what background? What would you really need to carry out your research? And this should also, as a glimpse, as a short nugget of information, I've included such a cube of broth. If you would like to make a not so good soup, maybe, industrial soup, I think B1 would be the cube of broth, really having the extract of your proposal. And the idea is with this to convince both generalist and more specialist panel members. 4 people who will be reading your proposal, who will have first made their own individual assessment, then they will come together and talk. And maybe it's also good to know that there will be one so-called lead reviewer. So the panel chair distributes the proposals, and he or she says, okay, you are the closest to the field, you are please in the lead. And then, yes, this person will probably have quite some weight in the discussion. So it's of course good if you convince her or him, but in the end it's really also group dynamics. So everything to defend the idea to put your proposal in step 2 and to fund it should be in there. And of course it also means think well about what panel you want to choose. And the ERC database can help a lot. You can screen proposal, you can look for specific panels, what has been funded there. And I've seen quite some surprises. I remember an applicant who tried twice in the life sciences panel, didn't get the proposal through. The 3rd time she went to social sciences and got it. So also this can work, so keep an open mind. But yeah, looking at the researchers in the panels and so on, I think will help you in making a good decision. And B2, yes, actually you may also have seen in B1, in these 5 pages, you have no structure at all. I don't know how it is in MSCA. I think you have some structural clear features, nothing. 5 empty pages and a cover page. But still, a structure is crucial. You have to have a good structure that one can follow you. But it's entirely up to you how you do it. And in B2, you have just 3 structural elements, and between them you can again do what you want to do. So state of the art and objectives, methodology, resources, not much of a corset, I would say. Yeah? But here you put everything in more detail. This is really where you give a little bit, let's say, flesh on the bones for the specialists, yeah? Because in step 2, the specialists step in. They read also everything, but they may focus on this longer proposal and look for methodological details, organizational details, and so on. And is your budget well planned and such things. So they should be all in place. Risks and contingency plans are important everywhere, also in the first synopsis, but in more detail in B2. Okay, I guess this was already quite a lot of information. I don't want to overload too much and have that we have a free room also for discussion, but I think a burning question is also often, should I apply now? What is a successful potential profile? And I think luckily the ERC gives some nuggets of information on that, but in recognition how different it is between the field, they really avoid a one-size-fits-all or something. So I will show you the key sentence that the ERC work program provides on this for starter and consolidators. But this is really to be filled with the specifics of your field. But let's say, for a starter, the crucial sentence I would say is, a starter must already have shown the potential for research independence, however this is defined, and evidence of maturity. And what they are really an important point often commented on is there should be at least one important publication. It says now as main author or without the participation of the PhD supervisor as co-author. Now for many years this main author wasn't in this sentence. For many years it read, for example, at least one publication without the participation of the PhD as co-author. But one knows that there may be different institutional tribes and customs, and that it can be very difficult to have, in early stage, a publication without your PhD supervisor as co-author. So the ERC is recognizing this and has rephrased it as main author. But I think if you have such a publication, or more than that, without PhD supervisor as co-author, is a very good thing. And if not, It should be very clear what was your role in this paper. And you have the possibility to explain what you did and what was your role and so on. So they will be looking at that. Again, they will be looking for the special. They will not use just a one-size-fits-all scheme, but they need to see this evidence that you didn't just travel along all the time with your PhD supervisor, or later also a postdoc supervisor. It can also be a problem. For example, in the life sciences, if you have a huge group and fantastic publications, but I've seen comments saying, okay, we still don't know, did this PI really do it herself, and so on. So you have to explain a little bit what your contribution was. And everything else, I would say, are quite generalistic terms. You need to show a promising track record of early achievements and appropriate, as it says, to the field of research and your career stage. So, but the focus will be on publications and the receptions they got, citations if it's usual in your field, or maybe some honorary mentions, or really things showing that what you have done also at an early stage of your career has resonated within in the community. So think about what evidence you have for that. Monographs, yes, invited presentations, also very good. Patents, prizes and awards, and I will show you how you can present this because you have quite limited space, but still quite some space to show it. So since a couple of years, the ERC is using a rather bullet-pointed, rather formal template. You can modify it, but actually the ERC said we want to have it also in terms of I mean, now the success rates look good between male and female applicants, but there were issues, and they wanted to make sure that there is a similar treatment, and therefore they actually love this template, but you can of course change it to some extent. So yes, no surprises here. Education, current and obvious previous positions. Okay, sorry, this is just showing you where you can put it, and then I will show you the details of the template. So the CV template, and then the track record, which really goes or focuses on your publications and conference contributions. But of course, you need to show it also in B1 and B2. You should be quoting yourself when you write that you want to do objective XYZ, as we could show in paper XYZ. We can do this and so on. So not to just have this locked away in the CV and track record section. So, and now really the template as promised, so this is how the bullet points go. There's another page to that, and this is all available also, so you can really take the formula from last year. The templates don't change much, but we will have them soon over summer. So, education, current and previous positions, and yes, if you had a nice offer and had to decline it, of course you put it in. This is also an achievement. Fellowships and awards always come in handy. And yes, this may be a little bit of a critical point in some countries, for example, Austria. If you then really ask for a team, several PhD students, maybe postdocs, maybe it's your first bigger group, they want to see some evidence that you already have guided people, that you have already supervised. Now, there's one question if you could do it already formally. In some countries like Austria, you need a habilitation to really be a formal supervisor, but don't worry. You can say co-supervisor, you can explain that you were not formally the supervisor, but many of you will have done already a lot of guiding work, and this should go in there, because it needs to show this proposal that you can do it. It's somehow underlining your leadership profile to really qualify as a principal investigator. So think about it and really put it in there. Teaching activities is good, so show the most important things. Don't say, I'm drowning in teaching, or maybe show that you can have some arrangements to reduce your teaching load. This comes in also very handy, to show that the ERC project and the research you want to do in the next 5 years is really your top priority. But of course, teaching is good, and it's an achievement. Organization of scientific meetings, this is good, showing that you have maybe brought up an issue already early in the community. So if you're thinking more ahead, I think it's very good to think how you can strengthen your CV early, also in direction of an ERC application. How can you show initiative? What can you do to get even more signs of recognition in the community? Institutional responsibilities, very good. You may be serving on advisory boards and on PhD committees, other things, career advice, mentoring. We are hearing so many things here. This is also showing your profile as a leader in your field, early leader maybe, but rising star, if you like this. And commissions of trust is somehow in the similar vein. What is not in the template but is important, of course, if you have been reviewing for journals or for certain editors, this is important. And also showing how much money you maybe already incurred. And I mean, MCAA is fantastic, and I think we got recently some figures from the Commission. I never saw the original data, but they say that MSCA fellows, so across all areas, have a 20% higher success rate for an ERC application, and IF fellows even 38%. So this is good. And anyway, I mean, this is a great achievement, and you should show it, of course, in your CV, and maybe any other concluded grants, and showing, oh, I could raise already so and so much money, so giving the overall figure. Yes, here maybe showing also this career break, so you can explain any kind of career breaks, and panel members really said, don't be afraid of being penalized for that. So this is really something you can explain briefly. And major collaborations maybe is also good, that you really show that you have already a good network, that you're already talking and collaborating with the top researchers in your field, that you're an active scientist. So, but there may be many more points specific to your field. So really this is a rough guideline, but it should help you in thinking what makes you stand out and what can you really show, that underlining the message that you can successfully lead the project. And then briefly on the early achievements track record. So yes, you are supposed to limit the presentation to your top 5 as a starter or your top 10 as a consolidator publications. And I would really highly recommend that you explain your role and the significance, of course, of these papers in a second. So not just listing as many as you can. You can, of course, give a list to your entire publication list, and we know that the reviewers Google around a little bit. So they will look around, so you should have a perfect homepage and everything in place. But you're supposed to show what you are most proud of in these few pages, and to explain why. And this is why they didn't want to have just a big list, but what are the highlights, so to speak, of your publications list. And also selected, maybe invited presentations, prizes again, memberships. And what I would generally recommend is that you give overview information, like maybe so many publications in total, so many contributions, anything that you think is also really in your favor in terms of bibliometrics, depending on your field, and then showing the highlights. And this can give a very crisp picture of your achievements. Yes, please, could we have the microphone?
Does it matter the position where you are in these publications?
So,
the
yes,
position?
Yes,
like
yes, that's a good point. So for example, that also really depends much on the field. And if it's, of course, often in the starting grant, let's say natural sciences, you will be often first author and later maybe proceeding to last author, senior author, and so on. If you're somewhere in the middle, if you're not corresponding author, for example, but you had a really pivotal role, this is something also I would explain. Yeah? If you're always somewhere in the middle and it's not alphabetic listing of the authors, it could be a problem. Yeah? I mean, it also really depends with whom you are in the competition in a specific call. So the sad truth is, I mean, really, I think there are no indications that there is a specific weight on the CV compared to the project. There's really like walking on 2 legs. They will be assessing both. But I've seen, for example, comments saying this is a fantastic project, but the CV compared with the others that we have seen in this call are unfortunately not up to the standard. And so it can happen that the CV in the end draws down a project, or it can be the opposite, a fantastic CV, but the project perceived as not so strong. So both should be convincing and somehow mutually reinforcing. I hope it somehow answered your question. With the listing, you should explain if you have not the usual position to show that your role was important in the publication. Yes, please.
Is it important that our top publication be an original article or a review article? I mean, is review article like undermined?
It can be very, yes, I mean, I've seen quite a review. I would not make only the top 5 and just review articles, and it really depends also on the field. It should really be your top-notch papers, and it can be, I mean, it's often an honor to be invited to review, so it's a strong thing, but I would, by tendency, think original papers are usually a stronger point. But you can give references, you can mention them somewhere else, or having one review, one in a fantastic journal, why not? Yeah? So really you can also look a little bit what others did, and maybe someone will show you his or her successful proposal. In Vienna we have proposal reading days where we show proposals and so on. So it's good to have a little bit of an idea. But I would definitely not say it's a problem, but having only review articles, I would say is rather on the weaker side, probably, depending on the field. And there was another question, yes, please.
Could we reapply with the same project the second time? Yeah?
Yes, definitely. I mean, typically you will probably take on board some of the comments, but yes, it's the ERC somehow, they check if it's a resubmission, but the reviewers don't even know, it's not something that is pointed. It's like, it's really evaluated from scratch, for better or worse. Because I've seen, for example, applicants nearly getting the grant in step 2 in 1 year, and then they reapply, further improve the project, and didn't even get to step 2 in the next year, because panels can act differently and so on. So it's really entirely new game every time, for better or worse, one has to say. Please. Oh, yeah.
Do we need to write a budget?
Sorry, where we need, or
do we need to
write a budget? Yes, but only in B2, only in the longer section. There is 1 page and very simple budget structure. Yes, okay. Yes. But resources is bigger than budget, so they can already at B1 wonder, really, you want to do this project with 1.5 PhD students? How should this work? So you should give an information on the resources in terms of manpower already in B1, and this should be credible, because this is more important. Yes, yes. Oh, that's a good point. The ERC, so you follow the usual practices of your host institution. So they will tell you, and that's also important, there is of course an NCP network, but there's widespread help also at the institutions. And many institutions focus particularly on the ERC grant, so they may focus, they may add additional support, but typically they have the hourly rates, they have maybe some own budget calculation table, so they will make your life easier. But it's also good to think early, how much can you actually afford? Because you may dream even bigger, of course. And the dream is limited by 1.5 million euro, including 25% overheads. Yeah? So the direct costs are even lower. Yeah? So it's good to think about that early. So thank you for the question. There was another? Yes, please.
Yeah, you talked about the riskiness of the research. A researcher that is focusing on governance, risk management, and compliance. And now my focus is on the new general data protection regulation. So it's, it's something really new. And we are also awaiting for the approval of the e-privacy regulation. Right now, I'm in my 6th month of the PhD, and since it's a new thing and it's revolving, I would like to, after this project, after 3 years, I want to make an extension of 2 years through a postdoc, so I can, upgrade my research and add the new things that come with the e-privacy regulation. Then I want to come up with a business model later on after the postdoc and see if I can make my product a digital certifiable product. So is this a risky thing?
I mean, risk, I think it contains quite some important factors of risk, because you may really have to wait for certain data or for certain regulations to apply. This can be a risk, and not necessarily, it can also be a killing risk. If your proposal is, if they feel that it depends too much on external factors, that you cannot steer at all, that could be even too much of a risk. But, or let's put it in a different way. even if there were no risk of accessing the data, if the reviewers feel you're doing something entirely new, you give us a completely new understanding of, I don't know, data protection issues or another issue, you don't need to have risk to be fundable for the ERC, but a certain risk is okay, and in some cases you may have backup plans. Let's say you're doing something with case studies in different countries and so on, and you may have difficulties to access a certain community because of the political situation, can happen. Then you have maybe a backup plan in another country and so on. So that would be maybe a way to proceed. But there may be also risks that are perceived as too strong. So maybe we can talk a bit in more detail later, but just to give you a flavor, they will look at it really case by case, and a safe way to proceed can be, let's say you have 3 main aims in your research, and 1 or 2 of them are, all of them are conceptually interesting, but 2 of them are methodologically rather straightforward. So you probably can do it, yeah, if not something very bad happens. And then you have maybe objective number 3, which is really explorative, exciting, but can also completely crash if you don't get this, this data and so on. That can be a very appealing mix, because they feel, in any case, most likely we will make fundamental progress, a fundamental advance with your project. And even if this exciting branch doesn't work, it's definitely worthwhile going there, because it's so exciting. So this kind of package, maybe this is also conceivable in a field like yours, would be my reply also a little bit to this risk question. Oh, I don't know which was the next one. Okay, please.
Hi, I would like to ask 2 questions, hopefully short ones. First, is it a good idea to include to the team a senior researcher as a mentor, let's say for 10% or 20% involvement? And second question, does any experience outside of science, let's say in civil society, in terms of mentoring and organization and so forth, is it something that is relevant to put in a CV?
So second question first, I would definitely put it there. I'm afraid it would not bring too many additional points or something, but I would also, in terms of showing your breadth as a person, and so I would definitely put it in there. But it would not, I guess, compensate for a publication record that would be seen as modest. But if it's fitting in, I think it's very good to show simply what you have been doing and the breadth of your horizon. The other question, thank you also for this. I mean, the ERC grant is really very much about you being in the lead, being the principal investigator, but it doesn't mean that you have to know everything, so they are researchers, they are not unrealistic. So it's perfectly fine also to, for example, collaborate with a senior researcher. There is a borderline. If they would feel that in reality there is a shadow PI hovering over you, that would be really dangerous. So therefore I would put a very clear understanding what you are collaborating about, what is the role, and I mean if it's a small role, it's no problem at all. You could have someone supervise your PhD, co-supervise your PhDs, you could send your PhD to another institution, and so this is all fine. But I've seen also comments saying, okay, this PI is too how do you say, dependent on his collaborators and so on. So it's a bit of a grayish area, but if you're very clear, you're a credible integrative integrator of also the results, and you just get the help and the expertise you need. It's perfectly fine. They will usually be very happy that you have good collaborators. So I don't, yes.
I have a quick question about career development, actually. So, for instance, in Italy, there's a regulation that allows universities to hire the PIs that are successful in ERC, whatever the step, starting, consolidator, or advanced, as associate or full professor. Yeah. Without any other kind of public selection, because we say, okay, Brussels did the job.
Selection.
Yeah, Brussels did the job, and maybe better than what we could do. So. Do you have any hint about other countries that are doing the same thing? Starting from Austria, I'm curious, but it may be other countries.
I mean, and that's definitely also for many reasons a good point, because it's good to show in your proposal that getting the ERC grant will advance your career. For example, the chance to have a permanent position, and this is something we see in Austria, Qualifizierungsvereinbarungen and so on. So yes, there are really, depending on the institutions, several institutions certainly giving better career prospects to someone who gets the grant. This is clear. Maybe not that such a concept, but quite similar things. And that is also a good point to make. I wouldn't overdo it and so on, and if I don't get the grant, I will never work again and so on. So, you know, you can also get it the wrong way. It should never sound defensive, but encouraging in terms of this will really, then I will be qualified for a permanent position, or I will get this position. It's a good thing. It's an additional message that it really means something for you. And yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah, you can put that in. You can put that in, because if this is in line with national and host institution regulations, I think it's a good point to make. Yeah, in addition. So I don't know. Yeah, please.
How much does it matter the host institution, and what about if this host institution is the same where you have done your postdoc?
So second question first, perfectly fine. So there is no mobility rule for the ERC. You can have, I mean, it's good if you have seen many things in your CV, but you can be at the institution in which you want to do the ERC grant, apply from there. You can go to another institution with the grants. Everything is possible, and there's no bias at all. The other question is also very important, because the reviewers are absolutely not supposed to look at the host institution per se. So before there was a big part on explaining the research environment. This has actually been taken out over the years, and yes, you should show that you are in a good environment, in terms of you can talk to the groups around you, or you have good connections, it fits into the institution, but they are absolutely not supposed to look at this. Whether this always works is a matter of discussion, and they're very aware of that it still might be, I mean, now with Brexit we will see, but someone in Oxford maybe may have a certain positive unconscious bias. So there are really things now, people are trying to think how this could be avoided, but as it is such a personal project, so much dependent on you as a person, it's a little bit difficult to leave out the host institution altogether. But I think, and really they are briefed to do that, really not to weigh in the host institution. Of course you have to show, but you don't have to live at the Large Hadron Collider to show that you can do the physics experiments. You have to show that you have arranged, that you can really have access to the infrastructure you need. You can actually also collaborate with other institutions, so it doesn't only have to be only on the one institution. So this should all alleviate also, or put more lightness on this host institution question. So in principle, it shouldn't count at all. In reality, sometimes it may have some unconscious bias, and I think they're trying to work on that. I hope this somehow answered your question. Okay, I don't know where, yes, please.
Hi. Is it a good idea to include a startup in your application in order to generate a biomedical product at the end of your 5 years project?
I mean, there is a specific funding scheme which I really dropped down the table today, which is if you already have an ERC grant, you can get additional funding for a so-called proof of concept, which is really a type of funding, for example, for setting up a startup or really showing the commercial potential of what your results are. So, I mean, nothing speaks against doing what you say, but the focus is so much on, let's say, fundamental advances in science that you can have someone as a partner. Nothing speaks against it, but I would say the vast majority doesn't, because they say our research is at quite an early stage. Typically, a company doesn't want to go in that year because we are really working on a conceptual advance. And this is why it often doesn't fit. So what I definitely can say, it's not asked for, it's not a plus or something. If it makes sense for your field, if you can, for example, show, and this company will test the compounds and so on, it can be, if it makes sense, you can do it, but it's extremely seldom, I would say, that it's done in the ERC grant, and if it's more with a view to using results at a later stage, I would go for this small but useful proof of concept funding once you have the grant. And in more detail, I'm happy to talk later, if you like. I hope this answers overall the question. I don't know if there's, yes, please.
Yes.
So I might be wrong, but it is my understanding that these ERC proposals are not really tailored for big collaborative research projects.
They're not really for...
Yes.
Yes.
So could you give us an example of a consortium, of a size of a consortium, typical partnerships?
Yeah. Thank you very much, also because I would never ever use the word consortium in an ERC application. I forgot to say that, because the ERC explicitly doesn't fund consortia. I would say in reality the definition is a bit blurry, because you can have, of course, collaborators. A typical size, I would really say, is a core team of, I don't know, 3 PhDs, 2 postdocs, or some master students. That's you and your core team. And then you can have a really big network of additional collaborators, depending. Maybe you have case studies, you're traveling through the world, you need organizations supporting you with interviews, with translations, and so on. So then it can be quite a bigger network, but it should not be the impression of a widespread group effort, because they still need to see you as a mind and the driving force and the integrator of what happens in the proposal. So sometimes it may be a bit difficult to distinguish, but I think if you look also at if you look at projects, you maybe even get a better feeling. But core team plus and no collaborators, or several, or 10, it's fine as long as you have really defined what they are doing and there is no impression that in reality you have this big consortium working. I hope this somehow helped, and then in detail we can also talk later. Thank you. Well, yes, please.
So my question about the application timing. So I got my IF this year, so it will end in 2020.
Okay.
Does it make sense to apply this year, knowing that if I get the grant, I will only start after the MSCA ends, because I devote my 100% time to the
Exactly. So that's the question. I mean, there can be no double funding. There can be no funding for the same activities. So the question would be, you can always say that you would, for example, terminate the other project if you get the ERC grant.
Or start after it ends.
Oh, then it's fine. Now yeah, exactly. Sorry, I didn't hear correctly, and it's 2 years. Then it's actually fine. Then maybe only the question would be, how is the relation between what you're doing in the IF and the ERC? It actually hasn't to be a relation, but you can show that you're maybe doing some preliminary work that will support the proposal. It's no problem, as long as there is no double funding of any sorts. You're free. You have to show what you're applying for in the proposal so that they can have a look at that. But as long as there is no overlap in terms of funding, you're fine. No, there is no problem.
It doesn't have a negative effect.
No. So, okay. Wow, you've been very, very patient.
Okay. Hi.
I hope you're still surviving.
I have a question also related to Marie Curie fellowship. So I'm about to terminate my fellowship. So I wonder to what extent I can link the project to the fellowship, because something that I heard is that a common mistake is to make an incremental project.
Yeah, exactly.
So I will
that is really a certain danger. That they want to see a step change. And if they feel you did many things already in a project, I don't know, you did 3 case studies and now you do 3 additional in the ERC, I would be worried at first sight that this could be seen as derivative, as not really a big leap. So there is a danger there. You have to show why this is really a fundamental advance, also on the basis of the project that you already have been doing. So that is true. That can be critical. Yeah, we can talk about that. Okay, I'm sorry, we are running a bit late. You will, of course, get all the slides, but this is just to show you, here you can really look for ERC projects, ERC abstracts, funded projects. You can look at the panels. You can really search for certain evaluation panels. There is a network of national contact points and, of course, also a network of grant management offices that can support your proposal. Giving some examples, in Austria, it was mentioned, so we have, as many institutions, a grant proposal writing trainings. We have also proposal reading days. We have a library of successful proposals, which you can look at in FFG premises, which can be helpful, and then many institutions may offer similar things. We do proposal checks, we do interview training. So if you think of applying in Austria, you're most welcome to contact me. But you will have similar offers also at your institutions. So this was meant to stay on for the discussion, but we integrated the discussion. So I hope it was fine for you this way. And I wish you best of luck with any application you may plan. And yes, have a nice afternoon. Thank you for your